I've met many people in the room before at ICD events and elsewhere, but for those that don't know me, I'm a current member of the UK House of Lords. I used to be a member of the advisory board in the early days of the ICD, which I'll mention. I used to be First Minister of Scotland when my good friend Yves Leterme, who I've not seen for many years, was the Premier in Flanders in Belgium before he was Belgian Prime Minister. I never quite reached that higher level, but I know that Yves continues to this day to be very active internationally, and we both were very determined to do that when we were at the sub-state level as Premier and First Minister back 20 years ago. I first attended an ICD, I was thinking this morning, I first attended an ICD event in 1989, which was the 20th anniversary of the collapse of the Berlin Wall. And it was an event to commemorate that occasion. And I remember to this day, one particular panel at that conference that I attended, where the former Slovenian Prime Minister was on the panel. And we were asked on the panel by one of the students in the audience what we were doing at the moment that the wall came down and what we were thinking at that moment. And for most of us on the panel, we were talking about watching it on the TV. And he said that he had been in jail in the then former Yugoslavia for his dissent and his campaigning against the repression of the state. And that has stuck with me for all this time. As a driving purpose of ICD and the many initiatives that it supports, including the one that's been launched today by Tasmina, and the need for this organisation and these dialogues to continue to pursue diplomacy, democracy, and human rights around the world is absolutely vital. On Friday, I go to Manila. I've been involved for 10 years now in the peace process in Mindanao in the southern Philippines. The first negotiated peace settlement in the world chaired by a woman, Malaysian, who chaired the peace process between the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and the Philippines government. And 11 years on, the peace agreement still stands, and they are still working on it to this day. We're back next week again in discussions with the government about the next stages of the creation of the institutions. And I think actually one of the reasons why the agreement in the Philippines has stood for those 11 years and has been so successful in maintaining the peace thus far is because the agreement itself was so comprehensive and so sensitive to the many issues that people consider. So I totally relate to what Tasmina was saying about the emotional empathy of women engaged in peace and diplomacy work. And it's a very practical example, very current example of a peace process that was led initially by the chair and actually has survived partly because a whole group of young women from the local area in the Bangsamoro and Mindanao became involved in the interim parliament. And if I can put it this way, they're very good friends of mine, but all the older guys who'd basically been involved in the 50 years of conflict and all the violence and all the struggle that had gone on to try and make some change, they were struggling to make the new democratic institutions viable. And it was a group of young women coming into these institutions from the local region who've actually made a real difference in that area to take it on to the next level. So this is an entirely appropriate body. And I just want to say on this initiative, we live in incredibly difficult times. We could not have imagined in 1989 we'd be living today with countries being invaded in Europe by Russia, by what were then called dead conflicts on the Russian border that have erupted and scared people so much today. We would not have imagined the violence and the threats that exist around the world today back then. But we need to have an absolute focus wherever we are in the world, whether it's Iran or Afghanistan, whether it's the impact of conflict on the women in Sudan or in Ukraine or elsewhere, whether it is ensuring accountability for conflict and violence, or whether it is trying to negotiate peace agreements and peace settlements that remain. Women have to be central to that process and absolutely upfront. And I hope that the UK will continue to be a leader in this. We have been over the last 15 years. I'm concerned about the current direction here in our pulling back from some commitments internationally in overseas development. But there are many of us in the Parliament, some of them are here today, who are lobbying very hard to ensure that this country remains a global leader in this area. And I can assure you we're not going to give up, and we're going to make sure that that happens. So thank you very much for being here, and good luck with this initiative. And if possible, perhaps in the future, we could link into these amazing women in the Philippines that I'm back working with again next week, who I think have done a remarkable job ensuring the next generation have birth certificates, have education, have access to health services, and ultimately have jobs and a success for their families. And to see that happening year by year is worth every single ounce of effort we put into peace building and peacemaking. Thank you very much.